Hello. The problem of rational energy transition remains one of the most pressing issues on the energy agenda of the Russian Federation. Today we are talking to Yuri Stankevich, Deputy Chairman of the Energy Committee of the State Duma of the Russian Federation, about approaches to its solution and the search of an optimal combination of energy security and energy efficiency. Hello. Yuri Arkadьевич, I would like to start with the following statement. Recently, the thesis of an orderly energy transition has been heard quite often at the state level. What does this term mean? From the point of view of the energy balance, what are we transitioning from? What is our specified goal? In my opinion, this expression, energy transition, and the various word combinations that use it, are rather echoes of the ideological agenda that has been formed outside the Russian Federation. Therefore, if we look at the project documents of the state strategic planning for the long-term period, there is no such focus on the energy transition. Rather, we are talking about the need for a more rational and careful attitude to the resources that form the basis of our energy balance. Realizing that competition for traditional energy resources, including hydrocarbons on international markets, where Russia has always been strong or where it is now seeking to increase its position, will increase. Unfortunately, we must recognize that the quality of Russia's mineral resource base has declined significantly in recent years. Therefore, I repeat, it is more appropriate to talk about a more rational, balanced, energy-efficient management of the economy in order to promote the introduction of the best available technologies, reduce energy intensity, improve energy efficiency, and achieve the goals set out in the low-carbon development strategy for the period until 2050. A draft energy strategy until 2050 is currently under discussion. According to expert estimates, the document is based on the assumption of the long-term preservation of fossil fuels in the global energy consumption and self-development of the climate agenda. In your opinion, Yuri Arkadьевич, is there no risk of falling out of line with the trend? After all, another scenario is possible. Low-carbon development strategy is a document that was approved by a government decree in autumn 2021. So it is a document that already has a certain legal status. Another issue is that there is still no action plan for its implementation. Today, a project of the energy strategy for the period up to 2050 is being discussed. And the questions you are addressing today, I understand correctly, are related to the formation of the project, the target scenarios that are outlined there today. And there is an optimistic scenario, an inertial scenario, and a stress scenario, which, let us say, assumes a significant reduction in Russian gas, oil, and coal exports, and to such serious estimates as 70 million tons against 230 million tons in 2023. Which we are also talking about. That is, even such stress scenarios are being worked out in case the international situation changes. If we talk about consumption forecasts, which are presented in the draft strategy, they are based on the analysis of actual consumption of energy resources, TEK-TOK note, in the world, and the structure of the world energy balance, which has developed over the past 10 years. And if we look at it, well, let's say, in the period of maybe 10 to 12 years, from 2012 to 2024, the consumption of primary energy resources in the world has increased by more than 10%, while the food basket itself has remained virtually unchanged. That is oil 36%, I think gas 27%, and the share of coal about 30%. It has decreased, but not significantly. At the same time, if we talk about electricity generation based on, among other things, traditional resources, the share of coal is still high, 36%. Therefore, this is a holistic view, which allows us, in this case, not just to blindly follow the ideology of energy transition and the green climate agenda that has been actively developed in the European Union, but to look at the trends that exist today, and as we assume, will continue to grow in the Asia-Pacific region, on the African continent, and the countries of South America. This allows us to conclude that Russia's hydrocarbon production figures will also remain stable over the forecast period, and perhaps even increase. As far as I understand, the strategy for energy development until 2050 envisages the preservation, high preservation of the share of coal in the energy balance, and even, as far as I understand, it's increased to 15%, although in the previous version of the documents, the share was, as far as I remember, 9.8%. Does this mean a revision of positions at all? And in this regard, I would like to ask this question. Does the preservation of a high share of coal-fired generation with modern capture technologies and other developing technologies in the sector mean that our development, our energy transition, I keep insisting on this term, is a feature of our development? Of course, with the desire of state institutions for a fully objective and balanced approach when discussing especially such serious documents, which affect all spheres of our economic, yes, probably not only economic, social life. It should be understood that the project of the new edition is being discussed under the minister who used to head the coal region. Therefore, I do not want to say that it is new, but it is probably a more balanced, more sensible view, including the understanding not only the role and place of coal in the energy balance, but also of the social consequences in places of traditional mining, and the need to address a range of issues related to infrastructure development, in case it leads to the closure of coal mines, what respectively to do with people. And these are tens and hundreds of thousands of people. So here, like a military commander, the higher he rises above the battle, the further he can see the battlefield. The indicator there, 9, and sometimes there were talk of reducing its share in generation to 5%, was actively voiced by the same officials of the Ministry of Energy in 2020-2021, when there was an active discussion in Russia of the low-carbon development strategy. We took on some ambitious tasks, more ambitious tasks. I told you, answering your previous question, that the share of coal in total power generation in the world today is 36%. It is virtually unchanged. Therefore, if we look at it, we even have lower figures on average. That is the first point. The second point is about, as you said, our unique contribution or our uniqueness in the transformation. That is, of course, not true. There is no uniqueness. If we look at the energy balances in principle, the industrial development of our closest partners today, China and India, the share of coal there is large, and moreover, they do not see any significant problem associated with the need to eliminate it to address the environmental agenda. And there it is absolutely true, as you said, there are capture technologies, ultrafine purification filters, and so on. Therefore, I think that based on our resource base, let us still proceed from the fact that today, if we take oil, gas, and coal dominates the three in terms of forecast, proven, and recoverable reserves. Therefore, in my opinion, it would be a wrong decision to completely abandon or significantly reduce production now in favor of other primary energy resources. Now many countries, including China, are discussing the possibility of introducing so-called cross-border hydrocarbon regulation, which provides for environmental monitoring and the possibility of imposing taxes and levies on exporters of certain countries if these companies have a high carbon footprint. If we maintain such a high share of coal, we simultaneously get into a situation where such claims can be made against our exporters. Is this not a case? Absolutely right. And moreover, the scenarios related to the introduction of these restrictions, additional fees or duties, they were considered when the climate agenda was actively discussed, and we had close cooperation with our partners from the European Union. Moreover, the presence of a carbon footprint, it was also considered at all stages of production, redistribution, and so on. So this monitoring system that you're talking about, it probably would not have allowed us to avoid such a payment.
Углеводородов, иных товаров, которые основаны, да, на этих первичных энергоресурсах, использовали бы его в своей продукции.
I believe that we need to assess the situation in a holistic manner.
Ситуацию в комплексе, исходить из того, что Россия является
based on the fact that Russia is a sink for greenhouse gases, based on the capabilities of our biosystem, not just forests, swamps, and other components. Therefore, if the overall trend towards consistently achieving the goal of climate policy in the world continues, then sooner or later the introduction of these additional indirect taxes, taxes on production, taxes on consumption, will come. But let us also assess the climate agenda or a climate policy in different countries in a systemic way. If we look at the 5 key groups that are involved today, the European Union, China, India, the United States of America, and Russia, all of these 5 have declared goals for achieving carbon neutrality. But only the European Union maintains a high level of commitment through setting targets, through monitoring, through tightening regulations.
Сохраняет только Европейский Союз. Китай и Индия низкая, ну, Европа, то есть, извините, Россия и США скорее средняя.
Yes, and India is low, while Russia and the United States are rather average. So, to summarize, there is talk, indeed, we should be ready for it, because these are challenges and risks for Russia, first of all, as a country that is traditionally set on exporting its energy resources. But I hope that balanced solutions, including through political agreements, will be found. Yuri Stankevich, in previous documents, the Russian government has talked a lot about the development of nuclear power generation and set the goal of increasing its share in the energy mix to 40–45%, as I recall. Does this document we are talking about now envisage the role of nuclear generation in any way? In diplomacy, there is such a concept as soft power. When we talk about international economic cooperation, those objective historical advantages, which, thank God, are preserved today, allow Russia to use nuclear power as an element of promoting our national interests in foreign markets. And it's no secret, and we don't hide it, if you look even the negotiations that the President of Russia holds at the highest political level, which concern the development of the energy sector, the dominance and increased presence of Russian projects and Russian technologies on world markets. This is always the number 1 or number 2 topic. And today we have, as far as I understand, the portfolio of orders that Rosatom publicly declares, foreign orders, has already exceeded $200 billion. I think 34 power units, 11 countries. New projects are now emerging in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and so on. As for the domestic energy mix, of course, 45% is not something very. It's some kind of super ambitious figure. I have not seen this figure even appear at the level of documents, preliminary versions of state planning documents. They said about a third, but based on the version currently under discussion, that's 25% of the domestic fuel and energy mix by 2045. In 2024, it's just over 20%. So there will be growth.
Чуть более 20%. Поэтому рост будет.
It is known that the Russian Federation has a huge hydro potential, which is currently only 20% developed, right? And what is the prospect of hydropower in the energy balance in general? Based on the energy balance that has been formed today, the share of hydrocarbon will remain approximately at these values. That is exactly what we said, about 20%. We realize all the advantages associated not only with environmental friendliness, but also with the low cost of electricity that is generated. And this is clean energy as well. Clean energy, yes. Therefore, it is important that the power stations work efficiently, that the state, through production enterprises, and of course, first of all, Russian enterprises, ensure the modernization of these stations in due time. Plus, I am sure, or rather, I hope, I persistently hope, that when preparing the general scheme for the location of power industry facilities that we mentioned in our conversation, the Ministry of Energy will still pay attention to the potential of small rivers. We have raised this topic with our colleagues in a number of regions where I have visited. For example, in Caucasus, they say that there is a potential there. When we talk about hydropower, we immediately think of the Sayano-Shushenskaya HPP and the Bratskaya HPP, but the potential of small power stations has not yet been completely utilized. But I don't think there will be any serious dynamics in terms of changes in quantitative indicators. The problem of energy transition, in general, already has its own history, and domestic and foreign experience has been accumulated. We see that the foreign energy transition strategy differs significantly from ours. Let's be blunt. It is a forced energy transition, which implies a sharp increase in the share of renewable energy sources in the energy mix, the rejection of transport with internal combustion engines, and so on. So all of these goals that made up this kind of accelerated approach to the climate agenda are still in place today. Tell me, please, if we compare domestic and foreign experience of energy transition, what conclusions can we talk about? What can we even talk about today? When, together with our colleagues from the Ministry of Energy, we analyzed changes in the volume of energy consumption over the last 10 years, we noticed that in the world as a whole, renewable energy sources account for about 2%. But by the way, let's say, nuclear power accounts for about 1.5%. There is, of course, an extraordinary situation. For example, the European Union, where, as they say, in the 24th year, already more than 22%. Yes, they have been setting targets under 50% lately anyway. The targets are 50%. But they have leaders, stakeholders, who set the agenda. This is Sweden, where it's already over 60%. But we realize that these decisions were often made to the detriment of economic efficiency. And if we look at the results of the elections to the European Parliament today, there have been a lot of discussions recently about the results of the elections to the European Parliament, where the right-wingers have strengthened their positions, the conservatives have strengthened their positions, but at the same time the traditional group of Democrats, the Socialists, the European People's Party, have retained their majority. But whether they reflect the position of the votes is a big question. Because if we look at the polls of the EU, then say the climate agenda, which is directly related to renewable energy sources, has remained dominant over the last few years. But today, against the background of rising prices and migration problems, it has already fallen to the 4th or 5th place. That is why those ambitious plans, which have not been revised yet, moreover, the European Union is now saying that by 2050, they want to reduce the share of greenhouse gas emissions compared to the 90th year to 90%. But I do not know to what extent they will be realized. Why did I bring this up? Because the foreign countries you mentioned are not only opposed to Russia. The European Union today also perceives China and BRICS as antagonists, although BRICS, if you have paid attention, does not preach such approaches in its ideological agenda towards the EU. Therefore, for the time being, we assume that the European Union will stick to its plans, at least in the medium term. And accordingly, this market is closed for us, for our traditional energy resources. And the development of renewable energy in Russia will be mainly carried out in those areas where it is more economically favorable. And we cannot expect to reach parity with traditional energy in terms of its economic performance in the next 5, 7, 10 years. Moreover, the draft energy strategy very carefully states that achieving this parity and ending state subsidies is possible after 2035. I emphasize not by 2035, but after 2035. Therefore, of course, this is a crucial area, and we have our enterprises that are fully involved in the production of solar panels and equipment. The task is set for wind power stations, but of course, we have not yet set ourselves such indicators, which have been achieved in the EU today, because we do not see the need for this. Thank you.